Blob Rain. Blob Rain? That's right. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of BrainScratch. I'm your host, John Lorden. Behind me I have my list of suggestions up, and on there is Blob Rain. What the heck could that be about? That doesn't even sound real. Well, guess what? There's actually some very interesting occurrences happening around that. Let's jump right in and start with a video. This was originally on the National Geographic channel.
The mysterious goo covers the branches of her trees.
It used to be here. I had it cut down, but the branches went up there, it went over there, and the gel was just hanging globs down from the branches all over. It was just really kind of gross.
Clear gel apparently all over this woman's tree. And this apparently happened in 1994 in Oakville, Washington. And this is very interesting for me because, you know, frequently I will come to Wikipedia and do research on a particular town or area if I just want to learn more about it. You guys know that I bring that up in these shows regularly. But I was very interested in this Wikipedia entry because, yeah, sure, they talk about, you know, the population during the census, which honestly is very, very small and could potentially lead you to think that maybe there's a bit of folklore kind of going on in this story. However, you can see under its history, they have the Clear Blobs incident. Let's check that out. On August 7th, 1994, during a rainstorm, blobs of translucent gelatinous substance, half the size of grains of rice each, fell at the farm home of Sunny Barclift. Shortly afterwards, Barclift's mother, Dottie Hearn, had to go to the hospital suffering from dizziness and nausea, and Barclift and a friend also suffered minor bouts of fatigue and nausea after handling the blobs. However, Dr. David Little, who treated Hearn, expressed doubt that Hearn's symptoms were due to the blobs and apparently instead to have been caused by an inner ear condition. Hearn herself also acknowledged that the appearance of the blobs could have been a mere coincidence unconnected with their maladies. It was also reported that Sunny's kitten had died after contact with the blobs following a battle with severe intestinal problems prior to the incident. The blobs were confirmed to have fallen a second time at the Barclift farm, but no one was reported to have fallen ill the second time. Now, her account, Sunny Barclift, is probably the most famous aspect of this story, but at least according to that video from National Geographic, which you can watch on the link below, there are other people that noticed this substance as well, although obviously this does seem to be a bit of a small community. So she's not the only one to have noticed this. And supposedly they had several days of rain over a 3-week period where this gel was kind of showing back up. I've seen a few different accounts about the size of it. This one states that they were about the size of a grain of rice. I've also seen half a grain of rice. But it appears that something was sliming this neighborhood. Several attempts were made to identify the blobs, with Barclift initially asking her mother's doctor to run tests on the substance at the hospital. Little obliged and reported that it contained human white blood cells. Barclift also managed to persuade Mike Osweiler of the Washington State Department of Ecology's Hazardous Materials Spill Response Unit to examine the substance. Upon further examination by Osweiler's staff, it was reported that the blobs contained cells with no nuclei, which Osweiler noted is something human white cells do have. So here we're already seeing a bit of conflict. Does it have nuclei? Does it not have nuclei? I really don't know. And it's strange to me because Sunny appears to have had collected some samples and forwarded them a few different ways. I don't know how much of the gel she actually tried to save up when this happened. If something like that had happened around me, I would probably try to gather up as much as I could, maybe not handle it with my actual hands. But that raises a question too. What if you had blood on your hand from some injury or something like that? You handle the gel, you send it in. Is it possible that when they test the gel, they could find that there was some white blood cells or something? I think contamination is certainly a reasonable thought when you're talking about this sample. Several theories cropped up at the time to explain the appearance of the blobs, though none have been proven correct. A popular theory with the townsfolk at the time was the Jellyfish Theory, which postulated that the blobs were the result of bombing runs by the military in the ocean 50 miles away from the farm, causing explosion within a smack of jellyfish, which were then dispersed into a rain cloud. Although neither Barclift nor Osweiler favored the idea, the theory was so popular with the townsfolk that there was discussion of holding a jellyfish festival, and that the local tavern even concocted a new drink in honor of the incident, the Jellyfish, composed of vodka, gelatin, and juice. So this really does have some feeling of folklore kind of building up around it. I mean, if you're making a drink about it and considering a celebration festival around it, I don't know that I really buy that excuse about the jellyfish being blown up, but that's the first of theories that we see that touches into some type of military operation that might be related to this. And if you look into this a little bit, you will find a lot of information out there where people are theorizing that this might have been the result of, yes, I'm going to say it, chemtrails, other types of government testing. For some reason, they were doing some type of test on these people in this specific area of some, biological agents or something along those lines. There's a lot of different theories about this. But is this the only occurrence? Are we just talking about this one time in 1994? I don't know, because there is another little note here about, for further information, see star jelly. Star jelly, which has several pretty entertaining additional names like star rot, star shot, or moon poo. Yeah, moon poo. Is a gelatinous substance sometimes found on grass or even on branches of trees. According to folklore, it is deposited on the earth during meteor showers. Star jelly is described as a translucent or grayish white gelatin that tends to evaporate shortly after having, quote, fallen. And if we jump down, they have specific examples here that go all the way back to November 11th, 1846, a occurrence in 1950, 1979, 1983, 1996, 1997, 2009, 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2015. Although I do have to note that many of these occurrences do not appear to be the same type of object. Either it's varying in color, it's varying in size. I mean, initially we were talking about something the size of a grain of rice. In some of these occurrences, they're talking about a blob that is several feet wide. It's really all over the place. But that's not all. If you look up star jelly on YouTube, you will have plenty of entertaining videos. Here is another one, somewhat recent. This is from April 2014.
So we checked out the mysterious spheres for ourselves today, and they were still there. They're like gooey marbles that ooze out a water substance when we squish them. They roll, they shine, and they're just out of this world.
Purple, gooey marbles found in the middle of the desert. And even when I first saw that footage, it immediately struck back to me, are you guys watching The Crazy Russian Hacker yet? I talked about him as one of my top 7 favorite YouTubers. Lately, he's been playing with these things called Orbeez, and he's been doing a lot of different experiments. Actually, the Backyard Scientist has as well. And I was wondering about Orbeez, and can you buy them in just a tube of purple? And indeed you can. As a matter of fact, here's Walmart.com selling them for only $3.99. So if I wanted to effectively replicate what we saw in that last news story, I would just need, I don't know, maybe $30, $40 worth of purple Orbeez and some water and a desert. And apparently that could potentially wind up on the news. Let's continue here looking into star jellies. Here we have another occurrence. This is from 2013, an article from HuffingtonPost.com. Mystery star jelly found in park. Legend claims weird slime deposited after meteor showers. Here is an actual picture of it with a title, Green Slime from Space Baffles Experts. A gelatinous semi-opaque slime that appeared mysteriously in an English nature park has proven a brain teaser for area scientists. Others have posited that the material may have extraterrestrial origins. Now, Extraterrestrial origins. What's the theory behind that? Let me bring you guys up to speed on that. A lot of people think that this star jelly is riding in on meteors or meteorites, and basically as they come crashing to the Earth, this jelly is being expelled from them in some way. And there's some things that kind of work against that theory. The first thing I thought when I heard about that was, well, how are they getting through the atmosphere? How are they coming in? Because we know that things pretty much burn up on re-entry, and this looks like it is very watery, a watery substance. I think the theory around that is people think that they might be inside of the meteor rocks as they're falling to the Earth, and then possibly when they break up, they get released. However, I've also seen information that meteors are usually made of metallic and stone, and basically through the entry process into our atmosphere, those get raised to very high temperatures, which is why we see them streaking through the sky when it occurs, and that would likely burn off any material like this. So personally, I don't know. I really don't know enough about this topic to know if this jelly is literally extraterrestrial in origin, if it is riding in on meteorites or finding it some other way to come here. It doesn't seem very feasible to me, but it's also worth noting that star jelly in particular has been occurring in works of fiction for literally hundreds of years up to this point. If we go back to the Wikipedia, we can see in fiction, Sir John Suckling in 1641 wrote a poem which contained the following lines: "As he whose quicker eye doth trace a false star shot to a marked place, does run apace, and thinking it to catch, a jelly up do snatch." We have another line in 1656, 1679, 1740, but one of the more popular authors to mention it is Sir Walter Scott, and he brings it up in his novel The Talisman. "Seek a fallen star, said the hermit, and thou shalt only light on some foul jelly, which, in shooting through the horizon, has assumed for a moment an appearance of splendor." So, at least in terms of works of fiction, this has been a thought that has been going on. It makes you wonder, did people back then come across this, jelly in fields and jelly on trees and really think that this was coming from space, that was being dropped there? Typically fiction is kind of, usually at least resembles reality in some way, or are these people just amazingly creative and coming up with it on their own? Another kind of famous piece of fiction that gets mentioned around this, The Blob, which was released in 1958, was supposedly based on the Philadelphia reports from 1950, and specifically a report in the Philadelphia Inquirer called "Flying Saucer Just Dissolves," where 4 police officers encountered a UFO debris that was described as evaporating with a purple glow, leaving nothing. So plenty of occurrences in terms of fiction and this concept of cosmic jelly. Back to the recent occurrence in London, we have a quote here from a site manager at Ham Wall. "This past week we've been finding piles of this translucent jelly dotted around the reserve, always on grass banks away from the water's edge. They are usually about 10 centimeters, 4 inches in diameter." So once again, here we have a completely different size than the first occurrence of Blob Rain that we ran into from 1994. We've asked experts what it might be, but as yet no one is really sure. Whatever it is very weird. And in a very interesting way to end an article, just like most intriguing paranatural incidents, the truth is probably more natural than paranormal. In a statement on Monday, the RSPB said it seems most likely that the goo is unfertilized, abandoned frog spawn. Unfertilized, abandoned frog spawn. Wow. I did look up some pictures of it. I'm not going to bring them up because I really don't want to gross you guys out about this stuff. It does look like it's potentially a good match for some of these occurrences. Fertilized frog spawn looks considerably different. There's kind of these black dots in each of the bubbles that are happening there. But if they're theorizing it was unfertilized, I do suppose that it might just be the collection of goopy mass that has been left behind. So back to our original occurrence in Oakville, Washington. I found a great article at factslegend.org, Raining Blobs, Mystery or Hoax. And they do a look at this that feels a bit skeptical at first, but then they had the fortune of actually being contacted by Sunny Barclift, and they posted her whole letter to them here. So I don't want to read the whole thing to you word for word, but I do think there's some information we can consider since this is a first-hand account. But do keep in mind, this is the woman that has assembled some type of fame over this, and I always get worried in situations like this that people are doing these types of things for attention, or maybe it was a real incident, but the story details kind of get played up for attention here. I'm not going to read the actual part to you guys, but even in this letter, there's this story about how there was a bunch of cats that were living there, and several of them died, but the population had to rebuild, and eventually did. That is much different than the quote facts that we heard earlier, where it was only one cat that had died in this. So it feels like the story might be growing a little bit, but that's just my 2 cents. I'll leave it up to you. Let's jump into some quotes here. From Sunny Barclift. It is my understanding that after the fallout, several people in the community did come down with a flu-like illness that lasted for 4 to 8 weeks in some cases. Mostly the information gleaned was during casual conversations and overhearing statements made by others. I have no idea about what each person's personal diagnosis was. So here, right off in the first paragraph, we're already getting, not what I would consider a backtrack, but we're already getting some more insight into the fact that this feels like these are stories that are being told around town, and people are retelling them to each other. Is this the 5th time that story was told? Is this the 6th generation of it? Is that story getting bigger each time? It's just something you have to consider when you're looking into personal testimony like this. When my mother first found the substance on top of a box on the porch where she stored her wood for burning, she touched the substance with her bare hands. My mother was treated for Meniere's disease, a disorder of the inner ear. She had extreme vertigo, dizziness, and felt the room was spinning. These are all symptoms of that disease. However, she also had a fever and other symptoms of infection. Upon her release, I asked Dr. Little what her discharge diagnosis was. He shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know, some type of virus. She did have a complete recovery. So, a little strange to me that the point of contact is the skin, and she winds up essentially having something that is affecting her inner ear. Could it have been transferred to her inner ear after she touched it? Of course. But if this was really some type of volatile or toxic substance, I would think that there would be some indication at the point of contact. I had brought a sample of the substance to the hospital and explained to Dr. Little that less than 24 hours earlier she had made contact with the substance, and would he be willing to do a lab test on it. He agreed and had a lab technician do a routine lab exam. That is when the white blood cell was found. The gel-like substance was clear, no color at all, and about the size of rice grains, was literally everywhere, in the grass, on foliage, on my truck window. The fallout of gel was not a single occurrence, but instead was a series of 6 fallouts over 3 weeks. And then what's strange here, the next sentence she says, all were documented by my mother in her journal. And I'm not sure why she would put a qualifier like that in there. She was there. So I would say something along, if I was writing this letter, I would say something along the lines of, yeah, my mother kept track of that, but I remember specifically that this was an occurrence that happened half a dozen times. Or, I would try to verify the information with my own experience at some point. I'm not quite sure why she defers to her mom's journal entries there to kind of back that up, but that might just be me. I mailed a sample to the Washington State Health Lab, which was assigned to Mike McDowell, one of their epidemiologists on staff. At some point, he drew the conclusion that the material itself was man-made and was being used as a matrix, a vehicle capable of transporting a virus or bacteria. He did report his findings to his supervisor. When he returned to the lab at some point, he discovered the substance was missing. He stated that it was the first time in 30 years of service with his job that a sample he was responsible for had gone missing. Now, if you watch the National Geographic special, you'll see him actually talk about this, and he is very plain when he says he doesn't have any conclusive proof, but he believes that this was man-made. And he does say that he asked about the missing sample and was told by his supervisors, don't ask. So I think that is part of what adds to the folklore of this story. When you hear of a potential cover-up like that or something, it certainly piques interest and attention around this. But once again, calling back to earlier parts of her letter, she's saying this goop was literally everywhere, and she only sent a portion of it to him. I would like to think that Sunny might have kept some of it somewhere, but I can't find any information to that at all. She does conclude her letter with, 2 years ago, some information surfaced on the internet that led me to the conclusion that the Oakville event was in fact a continuity exercise conducted by the military. So once again, in very typical conspiracy theory fashion, we pull it back to the military. I did bump into some information where it seems like there might have been some training flights happening over that area during that time. I don't know if they're related to this occurrence at all, but it does remind me of something when I was a kid, just this whole thing about weird colored rain. In 1989, we were dealing with a potential outbreak of fruit flies in the area that I was living in Baldwin Park, California. I literally remember that I stayed at a friend's house that night, and when we got up the next morning and we were going to the car, his parents were going to take me back home, I remember looking at the car and it was just covered in purple goop. They lived in an apartment building where they didn't have covered parking, and so it was basically exposed to the air, and it just got blasted by this pesticide. And it kind of looked like the purple Orbeez, but much, much smaller. There was just these little dots of purple goop all over it, and it was super syrupy. I did a little research into it, and basically they usually mix it with like a cornstarch agent. I don't know if that's to attract the flies so that they eat the poison, but it certainly left a mess on that car. And this whole thing just kind of reminds me of it because I was kind of blown away by it when I was a kid. I mean, there was literally, you would walk on the sidewalk and you could hear your feet sticking to the sidewalk. I mean, there was just purple goop everywhere. It was a total mess. And I'm still wondering if there were any side effects of that pesticide at that time. It was a little controversial. I believe someone even wound up drinking a diluted glass of the pesticide to try to prove to other people that it wouldn't harm humans. A lot of weird things were going on back in 1989, but I don't know, brain scratchers. This is where I turn it over to you. First of all, I do feel like there is a divide in this story between the Oakville occurrence and star jelly. I think these are two very different things that are going on here. And then if you dive into each individual occurrence of star jelly and see the variations in those stories, star jelly to me feels like an overarching theory that people are kind of adding stories to if they fit it perfectly or not. So I don't think that Oakville has to do necessarily with star jelly. Oakville, it seems like, had some goop dropped on it. Was it possibly jellyfish? You know, I don't think we could rule that out as a potential answer. There is something very strange about the fact that this material was found all over the place. There was enough of it, we can at least confirm that there was people testing it. So this did appear to happen in this area. I don't know. It's a very strange one, but if you want to entertain yourself, I highly recommend that you do a Google or a YouTube search on star jelly and just be ready to see some pretty wacky videos and a lot of theories that are extremely hard to they're hard to support or deny. It really goes both ways. So I really enjoyed looking into this stuff, but in the end, and this is what BrainScratch is for, right? In the end, I came out with way more questions than answers, and I don't really know what to believe. I'm not even sure that the goop that was in Oakville was affecting the health of people. It could be that people were getting sick, that, you know, hey, that it was in the middle of the rainy season. Maybe they were just getting a flu or getting infections, and that's just how it went. Cats do die. You know, it's very hard to look at these loose stories and piece together that there is some type of conclusion that that's related directly to this jelly being dropped on them. But I'd certainly be curious. It is a weird thing. I know from firsthand experience, when you walk outside and you see some type of goopy material that's all over everything, it does freak you out a little bit. So I hope you enjoyed that little bit strange brain scratch. But man, once I started looking into that topic, I was like, I got to share this with you guys. There was a lot more to it than I thought there would be. And there's so many different occurrences to look into. You could probably literally spend weeks doing research on this. So if you do that, if you find more information, please be sure to share it in the comments down below. I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts on this as well. And in particular, do you think that there could be star jelly? Is there some method where that would get through the entry into our atmosphere and survive a fall to Earth? Is there something you can think of that would allow that to occur? There's a lot of people looking for it out there, and now I'm a little more curious about where that belief is coming from. And I know there's much more science that I don't understand about it. So if you're diving into it, please share it with the rest of us in the comments. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll catch you on the next show on the Lord and Arts channel. Take care.